The following is rated NSFW. It contains strong language, spoilers, and adult situations, and may not be suitable for small children.
Order, please, order. Reels of Justice is now in session. The Honorable Judge Maynard Bangs presiding. Will you all rise for the Honorable Judge Maynard Bangs?
Be seated. Today we are hearing the case of The People versus Return of the Living Dead 2. For those of you unfamiliar with our court proceedings, we are here to determine if this film is guilty of being a bad movie. As always in this courtroom, films are to be considered excellent until proven awful, and the burden of proof lies upon the prosecution to prove beyond a shadow of a reasonable doubt that this film is guilty. Now, before we begin this trial, I want to make one thing very clear. The law does not recognize the existence of ghosts, and I don't believe in them either. So I don't want to hear a lot of malarkey about goblins, spooks, and demons. We're going to stick to the facts in this case. Leave the ghost stories to the kiddies, understood?
Oh, the Living Dead is allowed, right, Your Honor?
Living Dead is fine. This is specifically about ghosts and the potential possibility of busting them. Now, that said, Mr. Haslar, you are appearing for the prosecution, is that correct?
That's correct, sir.
You may begin your opening statement.
Your Honor, ladies and gentlemen of the jury, let me tell you a story about a good little film series gone bad. Return of the Living Dead had everything going for it. A healthy punk attitude, a good amount of zombies, and of course a whole lot of gore. While its daddy, George A. Romero, wasn't at home very much, off raising his new kids, Dawn of the Dead and Day of the Dead. Return of the Living Dead learned from his father how to portray zombies and engage an audience. His mommy, John Rousseau, married Dan O'Bannon and learned how to become funny as well, resulting in a well-formed young movie that was scary and gross while being humorous. It was R-rated and it reveled in it. In addition to gore, it had large amounts of nudity and the best dirty words. I'd pity the poor fool who tried to edit this thing for television. Junk food for the mind, perhaps, but it's good junk food, Your Honor. It was McDonald's. But here's where the story takes a dark turn. It mixes in with the wrong crowd. Away from the stinging humor of Dan O'Bannon and mixing in with the director of Meatballs 2. Now we have Return of the Living Dead Part 2, which features lame jokes, easy out plot contrivances, a child actor who's more Jake Lloyd than Haley Joel Osment, visuals that are nowhere near as shocking as the first, no punk attitude to speak of, and inconsistencies in behavior of the zombies in the name of comedy. In short, Your Honor, oh how the mighty have fallen, a more perfect example of just farting out a low-budgeted sequel because you can, there never was. This is a bad film, Your Honor, and we need to make an example of it here in this courtroom today so that people poking around in zombie canon don't fall into the deep, dark chasm of Return of the Living Dead Part 2 left in its wake, after they discovered the very good Return of the Living Dead. To go back to my analogy of calling the first movie McDonald's, this is junk food like Del Taco. And like Del Taco, after biting into this carcass of hot compost, you'll just feel bad about yourself. And rightly so.
Thank you very much, Counselor. Mr. Binek, I believe you're appearing for the defense?
Yes, that's correct.
You may begin your opening statement.
Well, I'm surprised the film was compared to Del Taco being a bad thing. I mean, first of all, I like Del Taco. And, honestly, I think this movie, despite not being as good as the first one, which was already going to be a difficult task anyway, it still supplied the laughs. I think it's funny. I think that having some of the cast even return from the first movie, albeit playing different characters, I think that that's interesting. I think that it's a different way of making a sequel, and it was a glad return to see people like Tom Matthews and James Karen not reprising their roles, but to be in another movie goofing around, and it's fun to watch them play off each other. I think their chemistry is great. While there is no nudity to speak of, I feel like it would have been out of place in this movie, just because it does have more of a kiddie, campier tone. But I don't knock it for that, because I think that, again, I don't think that Jake Lloyd is a good comparison. I think that this actor is more fun to watch than someone like Jake Lloyd. The zombies are more comedic in this film, I think, and I think the tone it matches. It's an overall sort of. I mean, it's just goofy. It's just a goofy cult film that I don't think was attempting to be as good as the first one or better. And I mean, I just think that it's a funny attempt at trying to just do something different. I mean, there's other zombie movies and like Walking Dead now that introduces things like zombies eating animals and horses and stuff. I mean, this movie has a scene where the zombies are trashing in a pet shop, and I've never really seen anything like that before this film. So something original to that, and this continues the trend of brain-eating zombies, which no other franchise has. And I just
That's more than good for an opening statement. If you care to elaborate on those later, we'll have that opportunity. So very good. If that's everyone's opening statements, I think we'll move on to exhibits. Mr. Haslar, you may begin your argument per se.
Sure. I'll pick them off in order that my colleague did. Let's talk about James Karen and Tom Matthews returning. They're not the same characters. So at first you kind of think, oh, it's kind of cute. That's like, Sid in Final Fantasy or something like that. But pretty quickly it nixes that. It's that great dynamic that they had in the first one isn't quite there. And the characters that they have, like James Karen has this weird bit. Instead of like being the one who like sort of knows everything returning because he knew that the first film was apparently like some sort of documentary. Instead, he's only like praying to God for forgiveness for really no reason. It's just sort of like easy to write lines that, oh God, please forgive me. I'm such a terrible person.
Question from the bench. Wasn't Karen's character grave robbing in the second film?
He was grave robbing, and then as soon as the dead turn to life, he quickly drops that character and is only interested in like, oh God, please forgive me. That's all he does.
Could he have been asking for forgiveness for the grave robbing is my question.
Of course it is, but like it's not a character. What I'm saying is it's very easy to convey lines. They're just like, oh no, what can I write here? Oh God, please forgive me. Done. Easy to write. My other little annoyance, but I won't make too big of a point out of it, is they're saying they need to like get buried skulls because they have like sort of a high ethical code, but then they proceed to go to a mausoleum where there are no skulls that are buried. They're all above ground. As for Tom Matthews, he had an arc that genuinely disturbed me as a kid when I saw this. I was like 11 when I saw this in a hotel room. And I watched in horror as Tom's girlfriend offers her brains up to her boyfriend out of love. The scene starts with like zombified Tom becoming jealous boyfriend and like saying to the other zombies who were like lusting after her brains, he's the only one that loves her. Now keep in mind, this is a woman he loves, so no one else can. It's disturbing and twisted. You're looking. The girl then puts up no fight at all. She agrees. She fights for like maybe all of 5 seconds, and then she's like, "Yeah, okay, I love you. I'm going to give my brains to you." She allows her boyfriend to eat her brains, give him her very life force that it's now just going to like fester in his stomach to be shat out, assuming zombies poop, out of love with nary an argument.
Question from the bench. Does the film portray any zombie poop?
No, it doesn't. And the first one would. The first one would go there. This one does not. This one's more kid-friendly.
Have we ever seen a film in general bring up the fact of zombie poop?
I can't think of one. Brain Dead, Dead Alive certainly did a good job of zombie sex and zombie birth.
Definitely, that's a zombie bile. Period.
But what we're saying is no poop here, so we don't know.
We don't know what's going to happen to her brains, but we assume that it's just going to be passed through his system with, whatever. There are implications here that the movie doesn't even get into. It's not really a statement on abusive relationships. Their relationship was fine before he turned into a zombie. Tom's story ends right there. He got to eat his girlfriend's brain because no other zombie should. I mean, oh my God, why are you showing this to me? It's not funny. It's not enlightening. It's just disturbing. It's not entertaining in the least. It's just a...
Are you saying it's misogynistic?
It's a peek into a very troubled mindset, sir. It is misogynistic, but I'm not sure that they were even thinking in those terms. It's just, I don't know what they were thinking. It's just disturbing on the whole of it. I'll pass it to my colleague for rebuttal.
Well, I mean, I personally find it funny. I've never really been disturbed by that scene, so I'm kind of surprised that you were. But I mean, if the film was trying something like that to disturb you, then it sounds like it succeeded. But I never saw it as disturbing. I always just thought it was a humorous scene to put in a movie.
You think it's funny to eat your girlfriend's life?
In a zombie film, yes, it's a funny moment.
Excuse me, counselor. We're not here to determine if it's funny to eat your girlfriend's brains. It very well may be, but we're here to determine if the film portrayed it in a light that made it interesting, or if it was going for a horror effect.
I don't think it really was, because the rest of the film doesn't do anything like that.
I don't think it was supposed to be horrific in any way. That's just not the tone of this movie. I find it interesting that it did horrify you when it was meant to be comedic. That's unique. That's different. I never interpreted it that way.
She wasn't even like some sort of lightheaded character. I mean, she didn't have depth. I wouldn't say that, but she had goals. She had ambitions, and to just like give up her life without an argument for nothing, because this zombie is going to live forever. It's not like she's saving him or anything. He just wants to possess her briefly.
I'm not quite sure what her aspirations in the film are supposed to be anyway. I just like the character because it's played by Suzanne Snyder. I just think it's fun to see that particular actress in more B movies.
I remember she tried to really evoke Cyndi Lauper in that she just wanted to have fun.
She seemed to be having fun up until that moment. I mean, actually, she was moaning when the zombie chomped into her skull, so I think maybe she was having fun even then, even at that particular scene. Unfortunately, we don't get to see any more of either of the characters, either Tom Matthews or Suzanne Snyder.
Exactly. That's the end of his arc, and that is just another part of it. That's just points to this film being bad.
Same thing with James Karen. Once he becomes zombified, you don't see him for the rest of the movie either, which is a shame. So, I mean, I will give you that. We don't see James Karen anymore. We don't see Tom Matthews or Suzanne Snyder, but their moments of becoming zombies, I say, is fun.
The moments of them becoming zombies is fun. Maybe. The rest of it, I didn't find that their dynamic had really returned in the first part, and they just sort of fade into oblivion in the last part. So, not out with a bang, but a whimper.
Question from the bench, though, back on the prior point. Was there not a similar arc that happened between Tom Matthews and his girlfriend in the first film, where she was clearly risking her life in allegiance to her boyfriend by being locked in there with him?
Yes, she did flee with Don Calfa, and they hid up in the ceiling. She didn't offer her brains, though. Once he became zombified in the first film, she took off. She didn't want to offer her brains, so I don't know. In a way, maybe Suzanne Snyder's girlfriend is maybe more in love, maybe more loyal to Tom Matthews in this one, to offer up her brains.
She's a terrible role model, if I do say so. Okay, well, my next point I would like to bring up is the kid. His name is Jesse Wilson, but let's face it, you only think of him as the kid. His opening thread is him giving a comic book to some bullies so he can join their club. It made no sense at all. These kids clearly despise him. They lock him up in the mausoleum. The bully... They chastise him throughout. They clearly don't care about him. I don't understand why he wants to give them his comic book so he could join them. The bully has braces, which makes it a little hard to take seriously. He's not like Scott Farkas. He's Billy. He's Billy the bully, and he delivers typical bully dialogue like "Your ass is grass." Very easy to write dialogue. The other kid has dialogue like "teens suck" and "ass wipe," and while the previous film never used the very easy outline of "oh well, good thing you don't have any brains, ha ha ha," this kid does it twice. Rebuttal, sir.
I honestly can't defend the bullies in this particular film. I also think it's kind of ridiculous that the kid offers up one of his comic books to join their club. Only to back out once he's given them the comic. It's kind of like, hey, here's the comic you asked for, but I don't really want to be in your club. But I can brush the bullies aside. They're a minute part of this film. Overall, you spend more time with the adults, thankfully. And we haven't gotten to this character yet, but there's a doctor character in the film who I think is quite funny and more than makes up for the scenes with the bullies.
Well, the zombies are chewing up brains. He's chewing up the scenery. I'll give you that.
Definitely. I mean, the bullies are not a highlight of the film. I will say that. But luckily, they turn into, they get eaten or they become exposed to the trioxin, and we don't see very much of them, after their initial exposure. Thankfully.
Question from the bench: is the taller bully with the braces? Who I would describe him as Richard Keel, a la Jaws from the Bond series.
Sure, definitely.
Was he not a pivotal arc in the kid's character development?
He's the kid's villain throughout the thing. I mean, he's the one that the kid gets to square off against.
He did defeat him at the end with the help of the doctor.
Did that not seem like the kid's sort of like, as I said, his arc overall from the film?
I guess I would agree. Sure. I mean, he was his bully in the beginning, trapped him in the mausoleum, left him there to die, and then they did square off at the end when he shoved the screwdriver in his mouth and got him electrocuted with the help of a bottle of bourbon smashed over his head from the doctor and kicked him into one of those power converter things and got zapped to death. So, I mean, yeah, the bully kind of did follow him throughout the film.
I wouldn't call it an arc, though, as much as I'd call it just like a very easy-to-write line. The kid needs people to interact with. It makes sense to have a bully. It's not like the kid learns anything. It's not like the bully learns anything. They're just sort of like these antagonists to sort of quickly write out dialogue.
I mean, yeah, I will agree that the bullies really are not the highlight of the film, but thankfully there's more than enough to make up for that.
How about the kid?
The kid himself, I like the kid. I think that the dialogue that was written for him is funny. I think he's funny. I can understand that because I watched it today for the first time in about a year, and before that I had seen it many times. But when the movie was written, I think maybe the filmmaker had a PG-13 rating in mind. That's why he axed the nudity. And there's minimal swearing and minimal gore, but the gore is still hard enough to get an R rating. So I'm not quite sure exactly what the intentions were, but I think having a kid as the antagonist or the protagonist, maybe the intentions were to make it PG-13 so that children could see it, which is definitely weird, coming off of Return of the Living Dead Part 1. But I'm sitting there watching it as an adult, and it still didn't bother me. I liked it as a kid. I like it now, and having the kid as the lead character, basically, it just doesn't bother me. I don't know. I think that the kid is interesting, and I think he also I think he was in the Blob remake. I think he gets swallowed up by the Blob in that film as well. So
good.
I just kind of like thinking about that too.
But question from the bench, did you think that this was an intentional choice to try to aim the franchise more at kids by including a kid?
I personally would agree with that assessment as well, Your Honor.
I think so, but it's just, it's unusual that they would do that considering the first one was so hard R rated.
Mm-hmm. I looked into it. The only reason this film is rated R is the scene where a zombie gets shotgunned in half. That's it. Other than that, it would have been a PG-13.
That's interesting. I mean, the brain munching, I think the brain munching in this film is actually more graphic than the brain munching in the first film. I think with the first film, you get, when the tar man initially bites Suicide, there's minimal blood. It's not like a geyser or anything. We see that later when Scuzz gets bitten by the half-torso zombie chick, and then we see a geyser of blood. But that movie really isn't that bloody. I mean, other than that. The second one, I think... the brain munching, it looks like sauce. It's like lasagna and cheese. I don't know. I think it's nastier. I think the effects are a little bit...
Let the record show that this court prefers the nomenclature half-torso zombie woman over half-torso zombie chick.
Okay.
But proceed.
So noted.
But no, yeah, I just think that that's odd that it's only the zombie that gets shotgunned in half
It's coming to me. There may have been a second scene, but the
Yeah.
point is there's relatively few. That makes it a hard R.
The opening, well, not quite the opening, but the first time Cyndi Lauper meets one of those zombies and punches his face in, I thought was very graphic.
Yeah, I mean, that's more campy, though, I think, than, like, I mean, you could probably get away with that in something like Men in Black, you know what I mean?
Keep in mind, this is 80s PG-13 we're talking about. We're not talking about current PG-13.
True. I don't know. I mean, it's just like green goo, you know? It's not really that gross. I mean, it's gross, but it's not like something I think would get you an R rating. But, I mean, it's more like the color red and, like, lens, I think, is what the MPA doesn't like to see, you know, some splatter like that.
Spinal column.
I mean, even that, it's so rubbery and, like, fake-looking that I'm just surprised that...
Clearly came from Spirit. Yeah, it's like...
yeah, it's not very realistic looking, but I think... Yeah, so I think it's interesting that particular moment was what got it the R rating, just because, I mean, when it aired on television on, like, the Sci-Fi Channel, they never edited that part out. I don't think. I don't remember that being edited out.
Mr. Prosecutor, I'd like to hear you elaborate a bit more on your point of inconsistencies of zombies.
Sure. So in the first one, the zombies, like, they're interested in brains. They do talk, but that's all they say. They say brains, 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 and they never stop. You can cut them up, and they're always, like, still coming at you. In this one, they're, you know, sometimes doing things for comedic effect. Like, there's zombies getting, like, turned on by a workout video. There's zombies just joyriding on the town because they don't quite see any humans to eat at that moment. That's what I mean by inconsistencies. They're not like this force that they were in the first one. I think, like, what makes a good comedy set in a world is, like, where you honor the rules of that world, but still put comedy superimposed on top of it.
Question from the bench. The first film features the very famous line of "Send more paramedics."
And send more cops.
And send more cops,
yes,
which to me is certainly the most...
You know what that does? That gives them more brains. It's enough intelligence to achieve their goal. It's not them getting turned on by, you know, some lady dancing on a TV.
Okay.
Well, I mean, you don't know that those zombies in the first movie wouldn't get turned on by an aerobics video because they didn't waltz into a building or a home that had an aerobics video playing. They didn't get the opportunity to.
Yes, I'd like to hear from the defense more about these inconsistencies. Do you think there's inconsistencies between the zombies between 1 and 2? Or do you think that the zombies in 1 show certain signs of intelligence?
I do. I think that the consistencies are there because they talk, they run, they do shout for brains, but they can also hold conversations. In 1 and 2, there's multiple moments where zombies can hold conversations. Like the half-torso woman explains in the first film why zombies eat brains. And then in the second film, there's a comedic scene where the kid phones into the hospital and has a conversation with the zombie, and the doctor grabs the walkie-talkie and asks the zombie who the president of the United States is, which the zombie replies is Harry Truman, and that, you know, defeats the whole thing and puts the pointer and drops the microphone. I think that that's even funnier than anything that happened in the first movie when it comes to talking to zombies.
I would agree with that. That one joke did make me laugh.
It's a good joke.
I think "Send more paramedics" is the funniest line in of the both films, I think, for me. But you know, just for this court's edification, I do remember that one of those zombies was smart enough to impersonate a cop waving in the other cops to set a trap for all the police.
In the first film, too, the tar man gets to Tina by wrapping that chain around the locker door, the little wench thing, and yanks it open, and, you know, that's, you know, and then she's saved by Suicide and the gang running down the steps, and then Suicide gets killed. But in the first film, the tar man is very smart.
This court agrees. I don't feel there was inconsistency between the zombies. I thought they both showed a lot of intelligence in both films. They may have gone more comedic with their intelligence in the second, but perhaps because of their strict diet of brains, that is what gives them such fundamental higher intelligence versus common canon zombies.
Let me throw another one at you, Your Honor. There's a scene where, like, a guy's trying to sneak away from a zombie, and the zombie's behind him, following his movements. He's not interested in, like, just diving in and getting his brain. When the guy stops, he stops.
Okay, that definitely is in there more for comedic effect. That's like something out of a Marx Brothers film.
Exactly. That's what I'm alluding to. So I mean, it is somewhat in the vein maybe of the first one, but I do believe like everything's like, oh, if I can make a joke here, then I will, rather than obeying like the rules of zombies that are sort of adhered to in the first one.
This court recognizes the rights for films to make jokes at any opportunity, whether it improves the film or not. You miss 100% of the shots you don't take. Now, Mr. Defense, I'd like to hear more about your thoughts of the zombies being more comedic and more of this kiddie campy tone. It seems like it's an odd direction for an R-rated film to take.
Yeah, I believe that they did make the tone a little bit sillier by having zombies being kind of the butt of a lot of jokes, but I don't mind that. I think it's funny. It makes me laugh. Like when a zombie is coming out of its grave and it places its hand up on the dirt, gets stepped on by another zombie walking by. So it tries it a second time, sees a zombie walking by, so it pulls its hand back to not get stepped on a second time. But then you see a zombie trot through, stomp on his head, and push him back into his own grave. I think that it's a funny moment. And, I mean, I've never seen anything like that in a film before. It's kind of like a Mel Brooks moment in a zombie film, and it works for me.
And what about the R rating with the campy direction with the R rating?
I just think that that's interesting that it's so campy and silly, but it still holds an R rating because there are moments of extreme gore that certainly would never have gotten it a PG-13, and kids would never have been able to see it. I like movies like that where the bizarre tone and bizarre special effects and everything, when it all comes together like that, it just makes, I think it's a unique experience.
And another point that the prosecutor brought up that I thought was strong was the reusing of the actors, although they were different characters. Would you, Mr. Defense, like to speak more on that point?
Yeah, I mean, I love the chemistry of Tom Matthews and James Karen. It's not as strong as the first film, but we also don't get to spend as much time with them in this film as the first film, unfortunately.
And it's a crime. They were great in the first one.
Right, it is. But I still think their chemistry works here no matter what. They even reuse lines of dialogue from the first film. It's kind of a fourth wall breaking, like wink, wink scenario. They do the same lines of like, watch your tongue, boy, if you don't like this job. And then Tom Matthews, like this job. I don't know. I like it. It's familiar. And I just think it's kind of funny and experimental for a sequel like that. There's no other franchise that has characters brought back from the previous film playing new characters, like we're same actors playing new characters in the sequel. It's very unique. It's very different. And I think that it works in this case because the rest of the movie, the tone is so bizarre that
I believe it would have worked had they shown up in the third one, but they don't. So now it's just weird.
Yeah.
So
yeah. I mean,
you feel like it was a missed opportunity for branding, Mr. Prosecutor.
Yes, absolutely.
It's kind of a similar thing that Ryan Murphy did with American Horror Story.
Would you like to elaborate, Mr. Juror?
Well,
is he allowed to talk? I didn't know he was allowed to talk.
Well, you're going to stop him?
The idea of doing an anthology series where you have a beginning, a middle, and an end, and then the next time you come back and you do a new story, but you bring back actors to play completely different characters. So it's almost like he's borrowing his entire playbook from this sequel.
I think it's cool. I like it. I think it's an original concept that, having been born in like Return of the Living Dead Part 2 from 1988, that's really weird, but I think that that's cool.
Your Honor, can you instruct the jury to deny its own testimony?
Yes, sure. You will ignore your own testimony for the time being.
Acknowledged, Your Honor.
And I would like to recognize that Joe Don Baker was both in The Living Daylights and GoldenEye. That's different characters.
Okay,
different characters.
Oh,
they are different, absolutely different characters. He's the villain in Living Daylights, and he is an ally in GoldenEye.
I remember GoldenEye more than the other one. That's for sure.
Now, earlier was brought up, I think it was by the defense, the doctor character. If I'd like to hear both of you elaborate on your thoughts of this doctor character. Mr. Prosecutor, you first.
I didn't mind the doctor character. Like I said, while the other people are chewing brains, he's chewing the scenery. But other than that, he's not terrible. He's a little overly comedic than I'd like for the tone. But given that what we're doing, he fit in fine. He doesn't really add a lot to the movie, in my opinion, where it like tips it over the scales from bad movie to good movie or bad movie to okay movie. But he's enjoyable enough when it shows up. He keeps you going.
Yeah, I think that his character, he I don't know if it was like maybe they had a comedian in mind when writing the script, but they just couldn't like
Rodney
hire him.
Dangerfield, perhaps.
Yeah, exactly. His one-liners, like that's all his dialogue is. There's zingers, just one after the other, like silly puns or like something that Groucho Marx would say, you know. But
these zombies don't give me no respect. No respect at all. No.
Yeah, something like that too. I definitely like hanging out with him when he shows up in the film. It's definitely, I find it to be a joy.
Very good. I'd like to pass it back. Yeah, let's pass it back to the prosecutor for whatever point he'd like to make. Thank you for answering the bench's questions.
I'd like to talk about some random points in the film here to pass on to the defense. It may not surprise you at all that the director is really not a fan of horror. The script, in fact, wasn't even originally conceived as a sequel. It was adapted to this one, and it shows. They sort of lamely copied over the Trioxin 245 and the exact same scene where the gas like goes over the cemetery and then it rains. They didn't even try to create something new with it. The first one introduced it in this really brilliant way where you think, oh, it looks like we finally solved the problem, and then the smoke pans over and then the dead start rising, and it's fantastic. This one's just like, okay, yeah, zombies, let's have the smoke go over and get to the rest of the movie. There's 2.5 minutes. I timed it. 2.5 minutes, Your Honor, of zombies being electrified. Just blah, 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 blah. It takes forever. It's interminable. It's suffering. And there's a Michael Jackson zombie that shows up because, get it? That Thriller thing he did. Hilarious.
I don't like that Michael Jackson zombie either. I think it's too cheesy. I mean, the 2.5 minutes of electrified zombies didn't seem long to me. If you would have told me 2.5 minutes, I probably wouldn't have believed you. But I mean, I don't know. I knew the director did do that. I'm aware that the film was conceived by a filmmaker who, I mean, he made another zombie film before, didn't he? Called Shockwaves, which is about like Nazi zombies.
I don't believe so.
That's not him?
I think he was like sort of pigeonholed into doing horror because this is like the one movie he became known for. He did Meatballs 2 before this, and I'm not sure he did much anything else.
Oh. I was always under the impression, yes, he did. He directed both. He directed Shockwaves first in 1977, which is a Nazi zombie movie, and then that's probably why he was hired to do Return of the Living Dead Part 2, almost 10 years later, was because of his history of having made a zombie film. Shockwaves.
Let the record show he also directed several episodes of 21 Jump Street.
Yes.
Okay. Kind of all over the place.
All right, I'll yield that he directed one, but I do believe he's quoted as saying he's not a fan of horror.
Okay, I mean that's fine. That's some people, they gotta work. They're offered a job, they're probably going to take it just to direct a movie and get a paycheck.
And my final point, Your Honor, is while there's not enough critics to get a consensus on Rotten Tomatoes, of the 19 critical reviews it has, it currently holds a 0%. And an audience score is a 35% drop from the original, now holding at 44%. The prosecution rests its case.
Very good. Your points there will be taken into consideration. I will remind you this court doesn't officially take in critical consensus as a determination of good or bad.
But 0% is interesting.
It certainly is an interesting favorite point. Do you have any quotes from those reviews as to what they had problems with the film? Are you going to Google them right now?
I had it over in a tab. Return of the Living Dead Part 2 lacks the stinging humor Dan O'Bannon brought to the original. This derivative sequel lacks the potency of its predecessor, which clearly possessed more brains.
Derivative is an interesting point. Sometime this court had argued that this had really left the predecessor's sort of formula, or did things different that we didn't like, and now this review claims it to be derivative.
But the prosecution rests. The defense may continue with its arguments.
Good, just running from that one then. Mr. Defense, any points you'd like to make?
I don't think Rotten Tomatoes is a good source to look at reviews anyway, especially considering this is a film 32 years old at this point. It's not going to have an accurate cumulative, because this film has gone on to, it has a huge cult fan base now. Otherwise, somebody like Scream Factory wouldn't have remastered it and put it out on Blu-ray. So that does have its fans out there, and if reviews from those fans or from critics reviewing the current Blu-ray were ported over to Rotten Tomatoes, I think that that percentage would be significantly different.
Would you like to make any comments on the headless zombie that talks?
That gets the screwdriver driven through its head and continues to speak?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, I think that that's also a very funny scene. It's probably one of the most memorable scenes in the movie. I've seen people wearing T-shirts that has a cartoon of the zombie head with a screwdriver and a speech bubble that says the famous line, "Get that damn screwdriver out of my head."
No, it's "Get that damn screwdriver out of my head."
A very Southern Belle accent.
This court would like to know how a disembodied head got out of the locked door that it was placed in that house and managed to make it to the power plant at the end.
I didn't even notice that.
Was it carried? Did it roll?
I noticed that today, and I was like, crap, that's not good. That's inconsistent. It's just there for a joke.
Thank you, Your Honor. Thank you, Your Honor.
This is a fair court. I'm here to grill everyone. Now, besides rebuttals to anything that the prosecution had to say, do you just have any points you'd like to make on your own defense, in defense of this film?
I mean, I will defend this film forever just because I think that it's a very funny film. It's not as good as the first one, no, but it never stood a chance, because the first film, I think, set the bar so damn high with its biting satire and its cast of characters, its wonderfully written screenplay by Dan O'Bannon, that this movie was never going to be as good as the first one. However, I think it's a fun time if you just want to see some goofy zombie action and some funny one-liners from people like James Cameron and Tom Matthews. If you enjoyed their chemistry in the first one, they're going to like it in this one. It's just, there's not quite enough. They do kind of peter off halfway through. But it's also fun to see a movie like this, a sequel like this, introduce new ideas, like having actors from the first film get ported over into the sequel playing new characters, and seeing like genre favorites like Suzanne Snyder, because she was also in Killer Clowns from Outer Space, and then Dana Ashbrook, who later went on to be in Twin Peaks. This is an interesting thing to see him, he was in this and then he went on to do that. That's kind of a cool, it's just kind of neat to see these people in this movie together as one, interacting with each other and knowing what they went on to do later in their careers.
All right, good. And if you would remind me too, in the second one, when the trioxin gas goes over the graveyard, does it rain to make it seep into the ground?
It does, and that thunderstorm comes out of nowhere, Your Honor.
Yeah, I think actually it might even be footage from the first film, just cut in, shots of the sky.
It wouldn't surprise me.
They could do that. I mean, they own the footage.
All right, very good. Anything else you'd like to say, defense, before we move to closing arguments and sum everything up?
I don't know. I mean, I would just like to say that I've met Suzanne Snyder, and it was a wonderful experience. We signed my VHS copy of Return of the Living Dead Part 2, and I consider it to be an honor, and I'm really, really pleased.
Exhibit A, the autographed VHS copy.
Pass that over here, please.
Yeah,
very good. So then does please continue.
Oh, no, I'm just saying, it's, I think it's a very fun film. I had fun watching it today for about the 50th time. So
the defense rests.
Yeah, the defense rests.
Very good. Very good. Now, both the prosecution and the defense have rested their cases. The attorneys will now present their final arguments. Prosecution, you may begin.
Herman Melville once said, "It is better to fail in originality than to succeed in imitation." What then can be said at something that fails at imitation? I believe Thesaurus puts it best when it says misrepresentation, perversion, corruption, poor imitation, poor substitute, mockery, and caricature, all of which perfectly describe what we've seen take place here today. It has no staying power. It has no real potency. I rarely laughed when they wanted me to, but did when they didn't want me to. It was a waste of time, a waste of your time, a waste of my time, a waste of humanity's time. And in a genre just overrun with zombie comedies, we need to make an example of the bad ones so that little Timmy Wanna Direct can emulate films like Part 1, Zombieland, One Cut of the Dead, and not become like Ken Wiederhorn, who directed this pale reflection of greatness. Burn it, ladies and gentlemen of the jury. Set it ablaze in nuclear fire so that it can never come back to haunt us. Thank you.
Perhaps I've taught him too well to be such a hellfire attorney. Quick question, though, for you, although it's uncommon at this point. When you reviewed these films, did you watch one first before two?
I'd seen the second one as a kid, so I knew bits and pieces of it, but then I watched one, then two.
Understood.
When preparing for this.
All right, thank you. Defense, you may proceed with your closing argument.
I mean, I love the first film. I worship the first film. And even though the first film is my favorite film, period, I still like the sequel. I still think it holds up as a lesser than movie, sure, but it's still funny. It still is fun to see some of your favorite people from the first film continue. They live on in the next movie. There's different jokes in the sequel that aren't in the first one. There's more moments that are unique, and it has a pretty kick-ass soundtrack too. The first movie has a great soundtrack, a punk rock soundtrack, and this soundtrack is really good as well. I think that it's worth checking out if you're a fan of the first film, if you want to see similar things and some pretty nasty brain munching. I mean, the third one doesn't really have brain munching. The third one's more of a flesh-eating, skin-piercing affair. But I think the first two, just they go side by side with each other. And I think that they're worth watching as a pair for sure.
Thank you, both. Members of the jury, Mr. Schlender, Mr. Rodriguez, and Mr. Maynard, you've all heard the testimony concerning this case. It is now up to you to determine the facts. Mr. Rodriguez, I think you've been determined to be the foreman. The bailiff will now escort you to the deliberation room.
I think it's actually Schlenderman's turn.
I think he's doing the interviews at the end. And
No,
Rodriguez is the foreman. But thank you, Mr. Prosecutor, for telling me how to do my job.
Question from the jury. Where are these ladies he keeps talking about?
Which ladies?
He keeps saying ladies of the jury.
Well, we don't discriminate here or try to pigeonhole anyone into any kind of identity. We're a very accepting courtroom.
I'll have you know there's a screen in front of you so we can't see you, so we can't pick you out and, appeal to your better natures.
In that deliberation room already!
I think our foreman became a living dead here.
No, well, it's because I had to open my fat mouth during the actual court case. So, Dylan, why don't you go ahead first?
All right, I think we heard some very compelling arguments from both. The passion for the prosecution was fantastic, and clearly the love that the defense had for the film really shone through. I think the major failing was the constantly framing it against the first movie. You know, like they both kept bringing up the first movie, and if you're going to do that, it's going to make the second one look bad. Like it's got to stand on its own, you know.
That's fair.
Well,
That's fair.
I agree with that. Just because the first one's fantastic doesn't mean that the second one, even if it's not as good, can't still be good. Jurassic Park is one of my very, very favorite movies. I still like The Lost World, Jurassic Park 2. I
I still love it. It's one of my favorites. I would call it a good movie. Is it as good as Jurassic Park? No. And although this is not, this is more of our KTMA days when we did Ghostbusters 2, we found that Ghostbusters 2 was not guilty. Just because it wasn't as good as Ghostbusters 1 didn't make it bad.
Ghostbusters 2 is pretty great, though.
Right.
So remember in 12 Angry Men when the juror number 8 throws the knife down on the table, basically bringing evidence in? I'm going to kind of do that in the juror right now, because when I watched this movie, you know what it reminded me of a lot? It reminded me a lot of Dead Alive. And I liked it just as much as I liked Dead Alive. And Dead Alive does so much better
that's high
on
praise.
reviews and critiques than this does. And I have a feeling the only reason this movie's doing so poorly is because it keeps getting held up to the first one.
Now, Mr. Juror number 8, did you see the first one?
I have not. That's the thing, too. So I was looking forward to arguments on why this is a good standalone movie, because in this kind of niche genre of like these gross out comedy zombie movies, basically my points of reference now are this and Dead Alive. And I actually like this more than Dead Alive.
Shaun of the Dead.
Well reviewed. Shaun of the Dead as well. But Shaun of the Dead gets
so much gross out. It's not gross out.
Yeah,
I agree with you, because I watched Return of the Living Dead 2 first.
Wow.
So I had nothing to compare it to.
Interesting.
I didn't get to watch. I watched 1 immediately after it. In fact, watching 2 made me want to watch 1. So, we were going to watch 1 and then 2, as the prosecutor did. But me and juror number 8 ran out of time, so we watched 2, and I was entertained throughout. I had nothing to compare it against, so it's just a standalone film. It entertained me. I think that there were great points brought up by the prosecution. It's disappointing that James Karen disappears so quickly. I didn't care so much about Tom Matthews disappearing, but James Karen disappearing was, I thought, a big loss. And I think he leaves kind of anticlimactically, especially compared to the first one in hindsight. But he is sort of replaced by that very funny doctor character who brings the chuckles for the rest of the film. So as much as I missed having James Karen, it didn't feel like a huge hole because of the doctor character. The campier, kiddier tone didn't come out as strange to me. Obviously, it is much softer than the first one, because the first one has David Bowie running around naked half the movie. But I don't know that I never felt like somebody should get naked at some point in the second one. I was still entertained most of the time. So I thought they both brought up good points. I thought the prosecution really shot himself in the foot by saying McDonald's is better than Del Taco. That's bullshit. Del Taco is possibly one of the best fast food brands.
He is not coming on the podcast next week.
Who?
Jake Lloyd is not coming on the podcast next week.
Oh, no.
I know.
He hasn't shaved his head or anything, has he?
He did not appreciate all that bashing.
I mean, I thought the kid was dumb, but like, he's a dumb kid. So but I remember we were watching the movie and I'm like, I don't mind following around the kid. Like, I don't mind that. And I thought that putting it in a suburb setting, it's something I've seen probably since, but I don't know if it's exactly something they did before that.
It felt like a late 80s movie, like you follow a kid who's getting on an adventure that's bigger than himself, and then everyone else gets pulled in, So I'm just going to kind of say something here. I think since the prosecution and the defense really tried to frame it in the context of the first movie, I have to go with the better argument since I haven't seen the first movie, and I'm going to find the movie guilty is my vote.
Interesting. So, Del Taco is wonderful. Just want to say that. However, the phrase "Little Timmy Wanna Direct," that's a $5 hit right there. That's a great phrase. So, "Little Timmy Wanna Direct" is a great phrase. But I know that when I saw the Michael Jackson zombie get electrocuted, I laughed. I laughed at it, and I enjoyed it. I didn't think it was that bad. So, for me, I did have the benefit of seeing the first one. I did think the first one was, darker, more mature, but I wouldn't have said it blew the second one out of the water, not to the way that I see the Rotten Tomato scores go. So as a standalone film, I got to see the second one first. I thought it was very entertaining. I thought it was fun. I would have liked more James Karen, but I got the benefit of seeing it stand alone, and I'm going to say not guilty. I thought it was good.
Well,
Very well.
to speak to the out of chronological order that you guys watched the films, I watched 1 and 2 back to back, 1 then 2, and it definitely colored my perception of the second movie because the first one is so good and has a moment like 5 minutes in when James Cameron tries to bludgeon a bisected zombie dog to death, and there's a sound effect of as he's hitting it that is one of the funniest things I think I've ever seen in my entire life. And there's no way that, no matter how good 2 is, I don't know how you can really come up with something that inspired and that just absolutely loony. So that definitely colored my perception of the second one.
But I would like to say we're not here to determine if it's as good as 1.
No,
we're just here
I
to
know,
determine if it's
but
not bad.
This informs the point that I'm trying to make.
Well, one at a time, Mr. Foreman and then Mr. Schlender.
Yeah, okay. This is it. It's not about comparison. It's about informing the point that I'm trying to make. So,
all right,
if I were to take away number 1 and just look at 2 on just a regular level, I would have to hold a lot of stuff against it because it instantly slipped off my brain as I was watching it. I have little to no recollection whatsoever of it. But the defense in bringing up the fact that the zombies were, in a way, actually consistent with the first one actually brought up my estimation a bit. I didn't think that I would actually have any excuse to find anything favorable in terms of the second one. And as well as bringing up the illegibility of Rotten Tomatoes as a possible way of discerning if a movie is good or not.
I agree with that. And to speak on this, the way that this court has always seen Rotten Tomatoes is it's nice to hear other people's opinions on it, but critical consensus doesn't necessarily mean anything because how many people would I need to tell you that the earth is flat before you believed them?
Correct.
Well, if 100 people told you if the earth was flat, would you believe it? If 1,000 did, would you believe it? It doesn't matter how many people tell me the earth is flat. I know the earth's not flat, so I don't listen to critical consensus.
Yes, agreed.
Mr. Foreman, how do you plead or find? Don't plead. You're not on trial.
Well, I have to say that I was surprised by how much I was actually swayed by the defense, but ultimately I have to acknowledge the fact that I have ultimately no soft spot for the movie, and I'm going to have to vote guilty.
Well, that's 2-1 then in favor of guilty, so let's get out there and deliver the verdict. Mr. Foreman, have you reached a verdict?
We have, Your Honor. In the case of The People versus Return of the Living Dead Part 2, unanimously we find the accused.
It was not unanimous.
Hey, Judge, you weren't supposed to be listening.
It was 2-1. I'm just saying. I'm the jury back here. It was 2-1.
2-1 in favor of what? 2-1 in favor of what?
Oh, right.
We almost unanimously find the film guilty of being a movie.
Oh, I want
very
to change
good,
my
very
vote
good.
after that. My goodness.
Now, thank you, ladies and gentlemen of the jury. On a more personal note, let me just go on record as saying there's no place for fakes, charlatans, or tricksters like you, Mr. Haslar, in decent society. You play on the gullibility of innocent people. If my hands weren't tied by the unalterable fetters of the law, then I would invoke the tradition of our illustrious forebears, reach back to a purer, sterner justice, and have you burned at the stake!
Yeah, you're rubber and I'm glue, Your Honor. Oh, no, wait, the other way.
Oh! Mr. Haslar, big win for you today.
Yes, indeed. Honestly, I'm just relieved because if there was a not guilty verdict, it meant I would have had to circle around the country myself and pick up every copy of this thing and burn it. So now I've got some free time, and I'm heading to IHOP. Peace!
All right. Mr. Binek, over here, please. Tough loss for you today, sir. How do you feel?
Well, it was a closer call than I thought, to be honest with you. I fought tooth and nail as hard as I could against this film. I love this film. And I will forever cherish my signed copy on VHS by Suzanne Snyder.
Any plans or strategy for an appeal?
No, I think I'm gonna let this go. You know, you can't win them all, but you know, comedy is subjective. There's always that. You know, I still will recommend this movie though to anybody who is a fan of zombie films in general. I made a mistake by framing it against the first movie. I think we both did, and you know, I'll take that into consideration if I ever try to defend a sequel in the future.
Very magnanimous of you. All right, going back to post-trial analysis with my favorite brain munchers, the boys from Reels of Justice. Go get 'em, boys. That's a good one.
Oh,
Yeah, no, that's fine. That's fine.
That was great.
All right. Well, that was a fun one. I can't believe. I mean, at least it was our first split jury, 2-1. What's so funny is I watched it with Dylan, and at the end of the movie, he went, "Oh, I liked that. I thought it was good." And then you never watched the first one, so I don't know what swayed you in between.
No,
what argument that Ben made pushed you over?
It's pinpoint logic, son.
It was the argument that they kept framing it in the context of the first movie, and I thought Ben just made the better of it when I didn't have the context of the first movie, because you guys kept saying the first movie was fantastic, but it doesn't sound like the first movie was that compelling. You know, I'll watch it. I don't want to get pilloried for it. I haven't seen it, but I'm just saying I think Ben just made the better of it in that context, and that's really seemed to be the crux of the arguments. But I will say, Addison, though, you did a great job defending it, you know, and like, I'm not saying people shouldn't go see this, shouldn't watch it, check it out. I mean, if you do 1 and 2, maybe that's just the way you got to do it, you know?
I think so. That's how I did it. You know, when I rented them both on tape, you know, 15, 20 years ago, I rented them both in the same weekend. So
I have to recommend watch 2 and then 1. Because if you watch 1 and go into 2, you will be more disappointed. If you start on 2, they don't really have a lot of connection to each other. So I think if you start on 2 like I did, you'll come out of 2 more favorably. With
2, though, they have those built-in jokes that are in reference to the first one, so you won't get them. You know what I mean? Where they repeat the same lines of dialogue, and Tom Matthews even says that, like, "Oh, we've been here before. This seems like a dream." You know, that only works if you've seen the first one, unfortunately.
Although they're not really that funny, even if you haven't seen the first one,
or
if you need to watch the first one, the second one, and then the third one, which actually isn't that bad.
I like how great is it seeing how the third one isn't like funny. You know what I mean?
It's not funny at all. Yeah, I will grant you that. I wish it was, and I wish it had punk music too, and it doesn't.
I like the outrageous gore of the third one. You know.
It has stuff I've never seen before, with that lady like, you know, driving nails into her fingers and stuff.
Yeah, I mean, that shit is nasty. That's really out of control.
Would you say it's got gore galore?
Definitely.
Yeah, no, it tops the first and second for gore. No, hands down.
It's the goriest of them all. And
is it gorier than Brain Dead? Dead Alive?
It's probably close. Maybe not that much. I mean, there's no like lawnmower.
Yeah, because that lawnmower is ridiculous.
That's a hard.
I didn't like Dead Alive, but I thought it was important to bring that up because I would rather watch this movie than Dead Alive.
Oh, boo! No, Dead Alive is my.
I would rather
definitely Dead Alive is definitely my favorite comedy zombie movie scene, and that's with Return of the Living Dead into consideration. I prefer Dead Alive.
I just can't get that from here.
Zombieland or.
Well over Zombieland, which I kind of thought was trash. Shaun of the Dead is, yes, it's comedy. Also, it's parody too, and that's one thing I know. We brought up the aerobics thing to me, and what the aerobics watching TV reminded me is it's like it awoken something primordial in the zombies that they remembered from their life, which is that they're addicted to TV and they're addicted to sex. So it kind of reminded me of like Dawn of the Dead, where the zombies are just naturally attracted to go back to the mall because that's where they spend all their time in life. So it was like that same kind of thing, like the TV came on and they just instantly snapped back into the pattern of being addicted and distracted by it. So I would have loved to have heard the defense bring that up.
Zombie wants some.
Well, deep down, I just know that it's there for a gag. You know what I mean? There's no
no. You always look deeper into something, and
I know when I see it, that's a gag. It's supposed to
peel the onion.
Peel the onion.
There's no subtext from Return of the Living Dead 2. It's just if the joke works for you, it works. If it doesn't, it doesn't.
Mr. Ryan, did you see number 3?
No, I haven't. But now that you guys are talking about it in such favorable tones, I think I do want to see it.
It's not as good as the first one. It's just better than
No,
I wouldn't expect it to be. I mean, I love the first one unreservedly.
it has the same trioxin in there, and they regenerate zombies. But the zombies aren't brain eaters in the third one either. They go for more flesh, which is different.
That kind of bugs me.
And isn't it a Brian Usna directed movie?
Yeah. Yeah. His special effects are fantastic in the film.
Got that in its favor. I mean, any Stuart Gordon collaborators, I think I'm
that's
kind of inclined to enjoy.
And we didn't talk much about the special effects artists between these two movies. I know they're not the same teams, right?
No,
I don't think
so.
anyone's the same except for James
Yeah.
Cameron and Tom Matthews.
There's a bleed over of one individual. I forget his name, but in the first film, I forget his name too, but he got fired. He was doing special effects for, there's that scene where the yellow cadaver gets its head cut off and is still running around without a head. The guy who initially made the special effects for that they didn't use, it was so bad that they just fired him. They brought in a different guy, and they ended up using that same guy for 2.
Interesting. I know that one of the fellows who did 2, we looked him up, and he did Star Trek Nemesis, and
Oh yeah, he did a bunch of Star Trek. He did all the next.
I wonder if it's the same guy I'm thinking of.
Maybe.
Yeah, it was
maybe.
quite the pedigree he had.
Well, so looking it up, at least the Tarman zombie in the first one, I don't know if he was created by, but he was puppeteered by Alan Troutman, who worked with the Muppets.
He's the actor in the suit of the Tarman in 1 and 2.
Yeah.
And who's that, Big Bird?
No, that'd be Carol Spinney. No, it just says that his
Carol Spinney was the Tar Man?
No, it was Big Bird.
Come here, kids.
It just says that he's best known for his work with Jim Henson and the Muppets, but doesn't specify specifically what he did.
He was probably Sweetums.
Well, now I love this
in
guy.
The background of this cast photo.
Yeah, exactly.
He was super.
So Addison, I'm sorry for your loss, though. I hope you'll come back on the show, though, and come and either defend another movie or, Lord knows I know bad movies you can prosecute. And speaking of bad movies, I know you do some movie riffing on your own. So what do you got coming up in the world of movie riffing?
Well, right now I've got a Kickstarter going for my spin-off project called Roastmasterpiece Theatre. It's a spin-off from my show Roastmasterpiece Theatre, and it's basically just an R-rated mystery science theater, but we use uncut exploitation films that have nudity and gore and swearing, movies that Mystery Science Theater and Riff Tracks otherwise would never show.
Hey, they did The Room.
True. That's not like a exploitation horror film.
That's true.
Everyone was exploited, and most of the audience was horrified.
Yeah, I truly do hate The Room, and I truly do hate Tommy Wiseau. I can't get into the whole The Room is so good it's bad. I just can't.
Yeah, I'm with you, man.
I've seen it riffed. I've seen it unriffed. I don't get it. I don't get the appeal. Give me Monos any fucking day.
I've never heard anyone say it was so good it was bad.
That's not a defense here on the Reels of Justice. You can't come in saying it's so bad it's good. That's basically giving up everything right out the gate.
Yeah.
And no, I'd rather have Monos 2 all day long.
Give me Monos, give me Werewolf, give me Boggy Creek 2. I don't want The Room. That movie's just not funny. It's not funny to me. It's not so bad that it's funny. It's just turn this off. This isn't. This is annoying, and Tommy Wiseau sucks.
Now, how can we?
Based
how can we find your Kickstarter?
Well, it's just, Roastmasterpiece Theatre. Theater is spelled with an R-E instead of an E-R to make it just a little bit different.
Just a
little British.
A little British. Something different. We're riffing 2 movies. Well, we're going to try to. I've got contracts that I wrote up, and they were signed by Blue Underground because I'm getting Cannibals from them. That movie was directed by Jess Franco, and I'm getting The Killer Eye from Full Moon, Charles Band. But I can't use these films unless I raise the funds through my Kickstarter. This is our agreement, I don't have to pay them until late July. But if I don't get the funds for the Kickstarter, I can't license the films.
If it's is it a package deal? I mean, if the Kickstarter doesn't hit its whole goal, can you take one of them?
The goal covers both, and then some. Because Kickstarter takes a fee at the end. They take a chunk of your earnings. So I went a little high because I know how much Kickstarter takes based on my previous Kickstarters that I've done.
50% in your firstborn.
Yeah. It's more than you would expect, more because you kind of cringe. You don't really know what to expect until you've done one, and then you kind of know, like, okay, well, I have to make X amount to make up for what they're gonna take.
Yeah.
But yeah, you get both episodes either on DVD, digital downloads. Riff scripts are available to claim. Executive producer, associate producer, it's all in there.
And what day does this Kickstarter end? What is its last day?
June 30th is the last day that people can hop on this thing.
Okay, so get there before June 30th and toss in some money.
It's different than with Roastmasterpiece Theatre because Lloyd Kaufman used to give me his movies for free. But now that we're licensing films from other companies, we have to pay the licensing fee.
Yeah. And they're expensive.
Whole new experience. I'm new to the licensing of films because I was working with Troma for so long, and Lloyd would just give me free stuff all the time.
Yep.
Well, I'm going to check it out after this record. And good luck to you.
And
thank you.
I've seen some. I've obviously seen some of your Roastmasterpiece Theatre stuff. So it'll be back to it's really and corny still, right? Your anthropomorphic film reel and popcorn bag
characters. I play a movie theater usher, and we actually shoot on location at a movie theater.
Oh, that adds something to it.
Yeah, I'm friends with the owner, and he'll just let us come in and shoot. It's really cool.
I had a friend once.
my companions in the show, the characters are Corny, which is a talking box of popcorn, and Reely, which is a talking reel of film. I didn't build the puppets. One of my late friends built the puppets a couple summers ago before he passed away. He was the initial voice of Corny, and I had to replace him. But I'm trying to keep the show going as sort of like part of his legacy as well, because he's not around anymore. But if he knew that, people still care about these characters that he created himself from scratch, I think we make him very happy.
And he did the theme song too. Is there a way to salvage that?
It's unfortunate that, the name change means a new theme song, which means I'm not going to be able to use his theme song anymore.
I wonder if you can use parts of it.
Sound like porny. Make him
because what I remember is you sing the title of the show in the chorus, but there's verses. So I wonder if you could keep the verses, update the chorus.
Yeah, I mean it's a simple lyric change. Change it from Roastmasterpiece to Roastmasterpiece. Like that's not difficult, but it's going to have to be all new vocals. I'm going to get a new vocalist to record with me, because he was the vocalist on the song as well.
Yeah.
So when he passed, I felt like not only did I lose like a good friend of 20 years, but I also lost, a musician friend, a guy who's willing to stick his hand up a box of popcorn and make a talk on a show for me. So
a collaborator, a partner.
Yeah, he was a great collaborator, and I think, I still have the puppets. We're still using the same ones he built 4 years ago, and I want to use them until they deteriorate into dust.
Well, I know, if you could see now, he would certainly be very proud of what you've done. Now, we also tend to ask for some suggestions. So if you have a suggestion for a film you've seen recently that you think the audience should check us out, hit us with it.
Just today, I watched the movie Red River with John Wayne, directed by
Howard Hawks.
Howard Hawks.
Nice.
I had never seen it before, but I've had the Blu-ray for about 2 years now because I snatched it up from the Barnes & Noble half-off Criterion sale. And, I have a huge pile of unwatched movies, as I think most movie collectors have. But so I plucked it out this morning because it's a little over 2 hours long, but with, pauses and lunch breaks and stuff like that. A movie like that can take up to like 2.5 hours. So I had an afternoon, free, and I kicked it on, and I love the thing. Black and white Western from 1948 with John Wayne playing a gruff cattle rustler and everything. I love westerns. My favorite genre is the horror genre, but I'd have to say maybe western's probably my second favorite, just because I love the cinematography that's in a western, the music, just the whole atmosphere, and seeing something that, even though it was shot in 1940, you're looking at, it's supposed to take place in the 1840s, and I love that kind of stuff. You're totally immersed in that world and immersed into the story of John Wayne as this cattle rustler trying to move his ranch from one location to another, and he's got to keep looking over his shoulder for enemy Comanches, and his employees fight within the group, and they're killing each other and stuff, fighting over rations of food. It's great. I mean, I thought it was a great story.
Yeah, that's awesome. So if your favorite genre really would be a horror western.
How about Jonah Hex? You like that film?
I do not
peanut
like
butter and jelly sandwich there.
What about Tremors?
Screening opening day, that movie sucked.
What about Tremors? Tremors is a horror western, and it's great.
Tremors is one of my all-time favorite movies.
Tremors is
Horror
great.
western.
Yeah,
See?
Tremors
There you
is
go.
cool. I like
Tremors is so good.
but I do not like Tremor. I don't like the rest of them. Tremors like 3 through whatever they're on, 6 suck.
Yeah,
Well, you
I haven't
Some
seen.
bacon.
Oh,
right?
you don't like the one with Jamie Kennedy? Come on.
Horrible.
I don't think I've seen the other ones. I've seen the one
Oh
where they
my-
start ass blasting to fly, and I'm kind of like, oh, ass blaster.
Yeah.
I don't think so. Just like,
No,
was subterranean worms not threatening enough? I mean, come on.
no. And you can tell the budgets get lower and lower with each film, so the creature effects get shittier and shittier. I think by the third one, the graboids are CGI, so it's just like, all right, you can just tune out at this point.
Yeah, that's awful. We're all about practical effects here. Use practical
Yeah.
effects if you can. Since I was the judge this week, I get to give a recommendation as well. And I think everyone should check out the Daimajin trilogy by Daiei. Daiei are the people who did Gamera, and they did the Gamera series. But Daimajin is their other kaiju series, and they get sort of a higher budget for it. So the effects are much better.
It's a kaiju film
kind
in
of-
feudal Japan, which is just
Yeah, it's sort of staged in feudal Japan, so you kind of get all that cool samurai stuff while you're waiting for the kaiju to come, And one of the best parts of it is the music is done by Akira Fukubi, who did all the music for Godzilla. So all those big trumpet, brassy stuff you love in Godzilla.
If you like trumpets.
If you like trumpets, then you can check out Daimajin. It's Daimajin. It's a trilogy.
Although I'm looking for a Blu-ray set, so don't buy it until I get mine.
Yeah, Ben snoozed on it, so he wasn't able. But I've got the Blu-ray trilogy, and it's definitely worth it. I think it's Mill Creek that put that out. I'd have to double check that though. But yeah, it's a great set. Check it out. It really sort of will change your perspective of what Daiei can do when they have the right budget. Because if you're a fan of, most of the Gamera movies, obviously those are very low budget. They become very kid-oriented films where they need to show monsters more and more, and that means it's going to get cheaper and cheaper. But Daimajin is more of like an adult oriented kind of kaiju film. So check out the Daimajin trilogy from Daiei. And that's everything we have for this week. Check out Addison's Kickstarter, Roastmasterpiece Theatre. It ends June 30th, so get there. And before it runs out. And Addison, thank you for joining us and coming on and talking movies with us.
Absolutely, man. That was great.
Oh, thank you. I mean, it's not every day I just get to chat, good or bad, about Return of the Living Dead Part 2. I love that movie, clearly.
Even
So-
talk about Return of the Living Dead 2, like no one's willing to do it because they haven't seen it. Or
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, or it's just not like it doesn't crop up in everyday conversation, let alone the first one. You know what I mean? Like,
you haven't hung
these
out
are-
with us enough.
I know.
Yeah, well, you inspired at least everyone here who recorded to either watch the movie for the first time or rewatch it, and hopefully it inspires our listeners to give it another listen or give it another viewing if they haven't seen it, or seek it out for the first time.
Give it a shot, watch it, and tell us how we were wrong with our verdict. Go ahead and drop us an email, and we'd love to read them.
Do not tell us
Yep.
we were wrong in the first one, because the first one is fantastic.
Yeah, we won't listen to it.
I don't want to hear from you.
So that's all the time we have this week on the Reels of Justice, and thank you for listening. We'll see you next week.
See ya.
Bye.
Adios.
Arrivederci.
And if you'd like to share your thoughts on this week's trial or the verdict, please email us at reelsofjusticepodcast@gmail.com. You can also follow us on Twitter @reelsofjustice and on Instagram, reelsofjustice. Also, check out our Facebook page, facebook.com/reelsofjustice.